Hello everybody, welcome to a brand new series that I am just starting out, and I'm very excited about the series actually. This is going to be using Blender for Minetest. And now, as many of you probably already know, Minetest allows us to use custom meshes. So instead of just having cuboid nodes that have textures on them, we can actually make models that are shapes of different things. And most often used to do that is Blender. Of course, there's also the node box editor, which I know nothing about, so I will probably never do a video on that because the one time I used it, I couldn't figure anything out. I mean, it's easy enough to use, but I couldn't figure out how to do textures. But we're going to be looking at Blender because I already knew Blender, and it was just an easier solution for me. So Blender allows us to do things such as, making, say, mobs, like this penguin here that I made. Or a little juice press and a silo and a barrel. It also allows these things, but those are not Minetest related. Or these beautiful cacti, or these goats, or these ostriches, or the banith. Or, let's see what else have I made this up on here. Oh yeah, we've got a little cement mixer, a bunch of different wall blocks, and whatever this thing would be considered, like the machine that actually makes the bags of the dry concrete mix, these little portal things. I mean, honestly, you can do anything in the entire imaginable galaxy. Anything you want, you can make. So, to start with, to get Blender, you go to blender.org and just click the big download Blender button, and you'll see that Blender is available for Windows, both 64 and 32-bit, which I hovered over the numbers opposite. It's available for Mac OS X, only in 64-bit flavors. I'm assuming they probably don't have OS X in 32-bit. It's available for Linux in 64 and 32 bits. And yeah, there's also the source code. So if you are running any operating system outside of these three, which I don't really know what choices you have, but if you were, you could theoretically download the source code yourself and then compile it and have Blender. So, with that out of the way, let's jump right on in to Blender itself and take a look at the interface and kind of everything that goes on here. So this is more or less what you'll see when you first open Blender. Actually, you will see a splash screen, which will give you the release date, a hash, your recent files, links. If you ever need it, there is a link for a manual, which should open up the reference on the internet. Of course, after watching this series of fully enlightening videos, you'll never need to use that link, ever, guaranteed. No, actually, there's a lot of very useful information there. There's also a link directly to their website, to the API reference. API reference, probably not something you're really going to need to deal with because that's mostly for like writing codes and stuff within Blender, which you probably won't be doing if you're just making simple models. So this is usually what you see as your default screen. If you're going to be using Minetest pretty much solely, I keep saying that, if you're going to be using Blender solely for Minetest, you can go ahead and actually just delete that light. You can probably get rid of the camera. And this default cube, we're going to open up our options panel here with the N key. And if you haven't noticed already, in the bottom left I have this little doodad going that shows my key presses, shows my clicks, shift, control, and alt. So you can kind of see what I'm doing if I don't mention it. But the N key toggles this sidebar, T key toggles the toolbar over here. To select on an item, just right click with the mouse. The A key will toggle between selecting all and selecting none. But for starters, let's select this cube, hit the tab key, and go into edit mode. Then we will hit S and 0.5. And that scales it halfway, and then we'll hit tab and go back to object mode. Now, we have a cube here, and I'm going to go ahead and see that it's named cube. I will leave it named cube because it's a good name for it. Then we're going to go over here. This is called the outliner, and this shows you every single item that's in your world. workspace, whatever you want to call this, your 3D area. This will show you everything that's in it. Right now we just have the cube. I am going to go ahead and click on these two. So now this is not selectable anymore. And it also will not render. So if I were to hit F12, oh, well, there's not even a camera found. But if there was a camera, it would just render out a black screen or a blue screen, depending on what my world settings are at as default. And then we are going to go and click on this little box here for object data. And in the display panel here, maximum draw type, change that to wire. Now we have a cube outline, and this at 1 by 1 by 1 Blender unit is the size of one node in Minetest. So if you are making a model that should fit in the space of one node, you want to make sure it fits inside of this. And this actually will line up perfectly with nodes and worlds. So if you're making something that should be mounted on a wall, it should be mounted on one of the walls of this, or if it's sit on the floor, it should be sitting on the bottom, hanging from a ceiling, should be joined up at the top. So that's how that works. Let's talk about, well, actually, before we talk about that, let's look at user preferences. So File, User Preferences. There are two things you will probably want to do when working with textures and stuff. And we won't be talking about textures for a while, and I will mention this again at that point. But there is this thing called MIP maps. And here it says scale textures for the 3D view, looks nicer but uses more memory and slows image reloading. MIP maps basically, if you're familiar with Minetest, which I assume you are, you know how the textures all look very pixely. If you have MIP maps turned on, it's kind of blurs all those edges together to make it look smooth. When you're dealing with textures and stuff, you usually want to see it with all the pixels. So you want to make sure you have MIP maps turned off so you get that pixely view. And then the other thing we want to look at is add-ons. If you ever want to export an animated mesh to use, oh, I don't know, for say a mob or something, you will need a B3D export script, which you can get, I'll have it linked in the description, but to install it, you would just go to add-ons, install from file, find that b3d export.py, hit install from file, and I already had it installed, so I get this little message up here, modules installed from blah blah blah. And then to enable it, we just have to search for B3D, and we have import export B3D Blitz 3D model exporter, which is already turned on. To enable it, you just check the little check mark there, and then you will see you have a file export B3D, and we also have OBJ. OBJ is what you would use mostly for static meshes because you're not saving any animation data. OBJ does not support animation data, so if you are exporting something that has animation to it, don't use an OBJ because it won't work. Okay, with that, let's talk about navigating. So we have zooming in and out, which we can do with the wheel on the mouse. Now, if you're using a mouse that does not have a wheel, you can use the plus and minus keys on numpad. Yep, just those two, to zoom in and zoom out. So that's useful because sometimes you want to get a far away view and sometimes you need to get real close up. Let's see what else. We can rotate. That's clicking with the middle mouse button. Now, if you don't have a middle mouse button, I believe, yes, if you click the right and left keys at the same time, you will emulate middle mouse button and can rotate around. Now, say we're zoomed in really close and we need to get to something that's over here on the screen that we just can't see. Oh, what do we do? Well, you hold down the shift key and click with the middle mouse, or right and left, and that'll let you pan your view around so you can get to other spots. You can also use Control and scroll the mouse wheel to move left and right, and I believe Alt, maybe it's Shift. Yes, Shift moves you up and down. So you can do that too. Of course, you could just pan do whatever's easiest for you. The other two things to mention, we have, well, I have to have something selected, I guess. Okay, let me just add something real quick. Shift A brings up the add dialog, and I'm just going to add a sphere here. Hit the G key to move it, and we're going to throw it way over there. So we'll zoom in real close to this cube. If we hit the home key, we will resize the window. Well, not resize the window. We'll reset the zoom to show everything. And then if we use the period key, we will zoom into the selected item. And that also changes where our rotation is. So when we click with the middle mouse wheel and orbit, we are now orbiting around that item. This I can't select, so I can't select that. But let me put a circle in here. See, I'm still orbiting that. But if I hit period, now I orbit this circle. And if I hit home, I kind of orbit that central space between the two. But if I pan into this sphere, I'm still orbiting in that central space. So if you want to, orbit around an item, it's good to hit the period key on the numpad. And that's really useful for, you've got a mesh in here and you want to see all the sides of it to easily just kind of spin around it and get a good look at it and everything. Of course, we have quad view, which Control-Alt-Q toggles. And that gives you a top, a front, a right, and then this would be a camera, but I don't have a camera, so it's a user ortho. And these windows are all locked, so you can zoom in on them, you can pan on them, but you can't rotate, which is fine because you get your three profiles, a top, a front, and a side, and then you can still see your 3D, which you can rotate around. Now, if you did want to be able to rotate all of those, that is possible to do. Under display here, you just have to uncheck the lock. And now all four of these rather, become usable. And you can actually lock them, and they will just jump right back to the top, front, and right. So that's useful. I don't really know what box does. Oh, it makes them all run at the exact same size. Ah, I didn't even know that. That's cool. Clearly I don't mess with that too much. Okay, so we have that. Let's talk about selections a little bit more. Let's go ahead and add a new cube in and go into edit mode by hitting tab and then going here. We can, select these faces. We can hit the shift key and select multiple faces. Completely ignore the message about my wireless just dropping. That I don't know why it happened, but it doesn't matter. And then if you want to deselect an already selected face, or in this case vertice, you just click on it once more and it deselects. You can also use the B key on your keyboard and draw a box to select, or you can use the C key, which will give you this little circle, and pretty much paint with it. And then you can make that larger and smaller by rolling your mouse wheel. Now that only does select visible ones, so this back corner will not be selected. However, if we change our view from solid to wireframe by hitting the Z key, and then use this, it'll select all of the vertices because that rear vertice could be seen through from the front side. And ignore the connection established message. I have a feeling my router probably just had an error and shut itself off and back on. So that is, wait, there's still more. There's so much. There's no way I'm going to remember everything. Control plus selects more, connected, and Control minus will make your selection shrink. However, if everything is selected, you can't shrink because it doesn't know where to shrink from. But that can be useful. I don't know how much use it's necessarily going to have, but it can be. So we get one over those. Editing. So, you create a new item with Shift A, and, we add, let's add another cube, because why not? So we have another cube. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say you're never going to want to make a cube and have it a cube. Because if you wanted to do that, there's no reason to make a mesh for it. You may as well just, use your default node and create a texture. So you're going to want to do some modifications to it. So tab key lets us go to all of these different options. For right now, we're only looking at the edit mode, which we've already looked at a couple times actually. But edit mode and object mode. Object mode is what we were in, which lets us select different objects. And the edit mode lets us actually make changes to that object. Like we can, move around these vertices on it like that. We could select two, hit the S key and scale them together. We can hit those two and hit the G key to move them. Or we could hit the R key and rotate them. And we could select those two and rotate them. We can really pretty much do whatever we feel like. Or we can switch. So say we want to push that one side in. We can go to the face selection mode and do that. Now I believe, yes, you can hit the period key. And actually this is changing our pivot point, which I won't even mention right now. We will talk about that in a later episode. But yeah, we can move all these around. We can still rotate, we can scale, we can do any of that stuff. And yeah, so we can, make this weird little shape. And then if we want to see it a little better in 3D, we can change it back to solid, kind of see the faces here. Say, wow, that is some really messed up cube. It doesn't even look like a cube anymore. Totally been destroyed. So we've got that. Let's talk about, for a little bit here, using a different program than I normally do. We're looking at about 18 minutes. Okay, let's do materials. So sometimes, not necessarily always, but sometimes you will want to have multiple materials on an item. Just cause, So say for example, we have this beautiful thing here and we want to set it up with two materials. First off, let's actually give these some good names. So we'll do screen and we will call this one body. Why? I have no idea. That's what we're going to do. So we're in edit mode and we select the face that will be the screen, which we'll just use as a top. So we click on our screen material here and we hit assign. And then let's change this diffuse color to, blue so we can see what we're looking at. And then we go through and select the rest of these faces and assign body to them, which they already were because everything was assigned to that. And let's change that one's color to red. So now we can see we have blue and red. Now when we export this file, which we're not even going to look at in this episode, it's just going to be a gray box. Textures are all done in Minetest. This is just to help us. So we can say this is one material, this is one material. So basically when we import this to Minetest, we would need two textures. One texture for this blue face, and then one texture for the red faces. And we'll cover that in a lot more detail when we get to UV unwrapping and mapping and texture painting and all of that stuff. Let's see here. Blah, 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 blah. Talked about those. Talked about editing, the navigating. Yeah, that should be everything. So, if you guys have any topics you would like me to cover when it comes to using Blender, please let me know in the comments. Because, yeah, if nobody gives me any ideas, I'm not going to have too much to work with. Please feel as free to be as specific as you want. So, say, I don't know, you want to know how to make a fire hydrant. Because why not? You could, just leave a comment like, hey, how would I go about making a fire hydrant? And I can make an episode on making a fire hydrant and showing how to model it and then do UV mapping and texture painting and even bringing it into Minetest and setting up the textures and everything. So, yes, be as specific as you want. If it's a concept, like how do I duplicate faces or remove normals or flip normals or, whatever. Let me know and I will try to make a video for you. Also, I do Blender freelance work. If you would rather not even mess around with making the file and would just like to pay me to do it for you, visit my website, nathansalpat.com. There's a freelance link. Just click on that, let me know about it, and yeah, I'll make it for you. So until next time, guys, yeah, download Blender and start flexing those brain muscles. It's a little intimidating at first, not gonna lie, but once you get the hang of it, it's super powerful, and honestly, you can do anything you could possibly imagine with it. And the best part is it's free. So there's really no reason why not to download it. And it's only like 80 megabyte download too. It's not even bad. But yeah, thanks for watching. I will see you next time.